I did okay, I tell you, by the end of the week. I'd say 417 is about right. Okay, we're here with the... We're not here.
Nice,
Yeah?
nice.
See? Now you're in trouble.
Are you getting a good picture there coming through on it?
Real nice. It looks good.
All right.
Okay, we are here with retired detective Mr. Jim Leavelle, formerly of the Dallas Police Department. And Mr. Leavelle, could you tell us what your duties were or where you were at on November 22nd, 1963?
I was working, I was a detective with the Homicide and Robbery Bureau, and my duties on that particular day was to cover anything that might come into the office. And so all the other officers had special assignments they was going to. We had 2 officers riding in the motorcade, but the rest of them was assigned to the trademark where the lunch was going to be held.
Do you remember at what point in time you first heard about that there was shots were fired, there was an assassination?
Well, I don't remember the exact time, but it'd be sometime around 12:30. I had gone out and arrested a suspect on an armed robbery and brought him into the office. And coming back to the office, I had been listening to the progress of the motorcade and on the car radio, and I pulled in the basement, turned it off, and got out. And about the time I was getting out in the basement, they were just reaching Houston Street, which would have made them turn back then 1 block to the on the right to Elm Street. So the shooting occurred sometime between the time I got out of my car there and the time I reached my office on the 3rd floor. And then the lieutenant up there informed me that there had been shots fired and the president had been hit.
As I understand it, besides the arresting officers, once they had captured Oswald, you were the first investigative officer, or one of the first to speak to him, is that correct?
I was one of them. I don't know, someone else may have talked to him. I can't swear to that. I went to the scene of the Tippit shooting, and they called me on the radio and told me they had the suspect in custody. And I just told them, meet me in my office, and I would talk to them there because I couldn't get to them over at the theater. So by the time I arrived back in my office, they had already gotten there and had placed him in a small interrogation room that we have. We have 2 of them in that office. And he was sitting in there by himself when I came in, and I asked where the man was and where the suspect was. And the lieutenant sat in there, so I went in and sat down and began talking to him. Now, whether anybody else had talked to him, I don't know. But I talked to him some 10, maybe 15 minutes before Cat Fritz and the other people come back in. And then they were getting ready to go in different directions to look for Oswald. Because he had called, he had Mr. Truly assemble all the school book employees, and Oswald was the only one missing. And Fritz, being the suspicious type that he is, he said, I want that man in custody, I want to talk to him. So they proceeded back to the office, and with the information they'd gotten from the book depository, they were fixing to send people in different directions to look for him.
Did they have more than one address for him? There was a form that they had that showed him living at an Elsbeth address. Did they have records? In other words,
well, let me shorten that for you. I know what you're fixing to ask is about whether or not they had different addresses on it. I'm not sure that they had more than one because, like I said, I was in there talking to them, so I don't know what addresses they had. But I do know that they were preparing to send the officers in different directions to start looking for them, so I assume they might have had 2 addresses that they wanted to look for. But I do know that they did probably had the one out in Irving, but I'm not even sure of that, to tell you the truth, because I wasn't out there talking to him. The door was shut, I was inside, closeted with Oswald, so I don't know.
At the time you were present when Oswald was being interrogated, was there any FBI agents present and Secret Service, or was it just strictly detectives and
There were Secret Service in there, and of course our officers, and it didn't make any difference whether or not during the course of the 2 days, it didn't make any difference whether or not the Secret Service or the FBI or postal inspectors or whoever was in the office talking to him. If Captain Fritz wasn't in there, he wanted one of us in there. In other words, one of the homicide officers in there. So there's one of our officers in there at all times. Sure, the FBI was there, but after I lost my prisoners, I say when they come in and took over the questioning, Cap told me, he said, go ahead and get as much information as you can on the Tippit shooting and make a tight case on him so that we won't have to turn him loose in case they have a little trouble making this presidential thing. So that was the purpose. So I immediately set forth to make a tight case on him on the Tippit shooting. So I spent my time on that.
Did they, when they arrested Oswald, they definitely had the gun, the revolver to do
Right.
that. It was a .38 revolver.
Right.
And they had made tests on that revolver to see if it had recently been fired, or did they? What I'm trying to say
They did the acid test on his hands and so forth, and they did get the positive results off the hands, but they didn't get anything off his cheek to indicate that a rifle had been fired or anything like that, as they think that they should have. But let me emphasize here that I've handled hundreds of murder cases, and I don't put too much emphasis on those nitrogen test things, because so many different things can trigger those positive results. Even urine will make the same positive test to the gunpowder will. So I would use it if I had it in a case, but I don't build a case on that.
Is it true it's not admissible in court, or can they?
Oh, it's admissible, certainly. Yes, it is admissible in court. But I don't like to put too much emphasis on it, because there's too many different things that might cause a positive reaction to it.
So the basic questioning at first was just concerning suspicions about him shooting Tippit, and did you notice his reactions? He seemed nervous, or did he cooperate in any way, or can you elaborate on how he acted?
During the entire time that I was around him, the time that I talked to him by myself, he was very polite and answered my questions. He didn't tell me the truth, but he wasn't belligerent about it, as some officers have reported, and I never saw him get belligerent at any time. Now, of course, I wasn't with him 100% of the time, so I can't swear to that. But I will say that during the entire time that I was around him, I never saw him get belligerent, or, of course, when we had to boo him down the hallway, he'd give that iron-fisted salute and so forth. But he was getting attention, and that's what he wanted. Now, with one exception, and I didn't see that he got too out of line on that, but that's when FBI agent James Hosty came in, and he was a little perturbed with Hosty going out and talking to his wife, and he wasn't there. But outside of that one little episode, and I didn't hear what he said to Hosty, really, but I could see through the, if you've ever been in that office up there, the captain's office has a window that's about 4 or 5 feet wide, and I could see into the office, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. But I noticed him talking and pointing his finger at Hosty. But what he was said, even then, I don't know. But I did set in on some of the questionings when the Secret Service talked to him, and the postal inspector talked to him, and someone else, 3 of them once talked to him. I was in the room when they talked to him. At all of those times, he never said anything, or he'd answer the questions. Just like when Holmes asked him about the ID you had on him. He said, did you ever use the name Heidel? And he said, no. And he said, well, do you know anybody named Heidel? And he said, no. And he says, isn't it true that when you was arrested, you had an identification card with your picture on it and Heidel on it? And he said, that's true. And Holmes asked him, he said, well, how do you explain that? He said, I don't. Just like that. So he wasn't smart aleck about it, but he just didn't answer it. So that's, to me, that wasn't being belligerent. That he just said, I don't. Just left it.
Mr. Leavelle, just to step back just a few steps, hopefully. You said that Will Fritz, because Oswald was missing from the book depository, just as doing his job and being a conscientious officer, wanted to see this man.
He wanted to, yeah. Well, he made Mr. Truly call them all together, all the employees, and Oswald was the only one missing.
Yes, that's what I would like to. It was Oswald, really, I'm not sure of that. Was Oswald just the only man that was missing that day?
As far as I know.
Okay.
I talked to the officers that was down there with him at the time, and there was 3 or 4 of our officers in there with him. And I've never directly asked him was anybody else missing,
but of course we know he was missing.
Yeah, he was missing, and Chris said, I want to talk to that man. And but I would assume this, if there was another employee missing, it had to be a woman, probably not a man. But anyway, I just never asked the officers that. But I did ask them what happened, and they said, well, after he got them all together, and they announced that all of them was present, with the exception of Oswald. And they said, well, I want that man in custody.
Do you know how they would have made that roll call if people had run out that worked there and were out in the plaza? Do you know the length of time that would have taken place, Mr. Leavelle, that they would have made this roll call, or how they would have done it?
He was after the rifle and everything was found. But it was after that he had them all assembled.
Just probably a little bit after 1, or do you know about
I
it?
don't have any idea. I couldn't even begin to tell you what time that was.
Well, we're obviously going to ask you about the 24th on Sunday. Okay, now, what first comes to mind with me is that we all understand in books, and we've been told that there was a delay in the transfer of Oswald. Might you be able to reflect on that for us? Just talk about it.
I think what you're driving at there is at 10 o'clock supposedly transfer time. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm asking you.
All right. The news media got hung up on that 10 o'clock transfer time. And I heard the chief tell those people myself. And his exact words were, if you'll be here by 10 o'clock, you won't miss anything.
Oh.
And that didn't mean that we're going to transfer him at 10 o'clock. But if you're here by 10 o'clock, you won't miss anything. We'll be transferring him sometime around 10 or shortly thereafter. But, as it turned out, that particular morning, Mr. Soros came up there. There's FBI agents in there wanted to talk to him. And Mr. Soros came up there. Well, maybe to be correct, I don't know if Mr. Soros was there or not. But I tell you, Mr. Kelly was there, and he was the head of the Secret Service out of Washington, D.C. He was there. And Mr. Holmes was on his way to church. And then he was listening to the progress on the radio, and he decided that he wanted to talk to him. And he made a detour, and instead of going to church, he came up there, and he turned. See, all of these people we didn't know was going to be wanting to talk to him on Sunday morning. So when we brought him down, or they brought him down, I didn't bring him down around 9 o'clock or so, and start that procedure. I had gone over to Captain Fritz and to the White Plaza Hotel and had coffee. And on the way back, we run into Chief Curry on the first floor. He was getting off the elevator, and there wasn't nobody on the first floor. And we stopped and talked to him about the transfer. And I suggested to the chief, I said, this elevator will stop here on this first floor. I said, why don't we take him out on this first floor, put him in a car on Main Street, and I said, we can have him in the county jail before anybody even knows we moved him. I said, as far as I'm concerned, we don't owe the news media anything. And he said, well, I promised them that they could film the transfer, and he said, I'm going to keep my word, because I don't want them to think we beat him up or abused him or anything. So we went on from, I said, well, okay, so we went on upstairs, and Fritz motioned for me to go on in and sit down in there because there was one other officer, and then I believe it might have been Sims, you know. So I went in and sat down. And so I was sitting in there while Kelly, the FBI was just, some FBI agent, I remember it was just talking to him. And then Kelly talked to him, and then Holmes talked to him. And so Holmes finished up his, I believe that's, I might have to reverse, but anyway, those two talked to him after I walked in and sat down in the office. I was sitting in the chair, Oswald was sitting in the chair facing them. Both of those officers, Holmes and Kelly, were standing by the desk. And as soon as they got through, they said, well, that's all we had. So I looked around the cabin and I said, well, is there anything else? He said, no, we're ready to go. So then we asked Oswald if he wanted to wear what he had on or if he wanted to change something. He had to put on that sweater that he had. So we let him put that on. But so we didn't know, had no idea what time that was going to be. So we didn't know how long they were going to. We certainly wasn't going to cut them off. They wanted to talk to him another 10, 15, 20 minutes. We would have. There would have been no problem because we had no deadline set on it. And so we didn't really know what time that was going to take place. I didn't know. They didn't know. No one had any way of knowing.
Okay, thank you.
And you were on, of course, the rest is history, but you were on Oswald's right, and Mr. Graves was on his left. And you were handcuffed to Oswald, but was Mr. Graves?
No, Mr. Graves was not handcuffed to him. We didn't need two people handcuffed to him because if you got in any kind of an entangle, such as did happen, then we needed one officer free to take action. Because if you're handcuffed, you're stymied in some respect, so you don't want that to happen. The only reason we handcuffed him to me was in case somebody was going to try to snatch him away from us for any reason. They'd have to take me with him too, because they couldn't tell he would get him by himself.
Did Jack Ruby yell anything when he shot?
He said something, but I didn't know what it was. And it's been said that he said you killed the president or my president or something. I don't remember. I don't have any idea. You'd have to talk to somebody else that understood it. I know he said something, but what, I have no idea.
Did you say something to Jack Ruby later to the effect of I've known you and why you didn't listen?
Well, I transferred Ruby the next day. And, of course, we didn't notify the news media that we were going to transfer him. And so I told Ruby while I was holding him in the jail elevator waiting for the car to show up. I said, Jack, as long as years I've known you, I've never known you to do anything to hurt anybody, hurt the police department. I said, you didn't do us any favor when you shot me. And he said, well, all I wanted to do was be a hero. I said, looks like I just foul thing done good. So, except he used another four-letter word instead of that, but that's. So I also asked him how he got into the basement. And I said, how did you get in there when it was supposed to have been swept clean? And he said, I had been down to the Western Union and I walked back up to he said, I didn't think I could get in, but I thought I could look down that ramp and see what was happening. And he said, just as I got there, a police car come out and driven by real Pierce. He knew Pierce, but Pierce had worked by us at one time. And he said, as the officer turned his back, somebody Bond walking out to the curb, he said, I walked right behind the car and went down the ramp. So, it very has to be that way. I know Roy don't want to believe that, and I don't fault Roy in any way. But I fault ourselves, or the security people there, because we didn't think there'd be anybody over there on that side of the ramp, but there wasn't. There was 2 or 3 people, I understand, up they only stationed one officer there, and that was Roy Bond. They should have had 2. Now, we had 4 or 5 or 6 on the other side because there was a great many people gathered on Commerce Street to see him come out because they knew he'd be coming out on that side. So in retrospect, we should have had 2 officers over there, but we didn't, and I don't fault Roy Bond on it one minute. And I know that he don't believe that's where he got in, but I'm confident because you go back to the time element from the time we got the telegram off of it, date stamped at 11/17, and I talked to the clerk down there at length about it. He remembered it, and being Sunday morning and everything, you didn't have that much business going on. And 4 minutes later, the shot occurred in the basement. So I've walked that 3 different ways: fast, slow, and medium. And it took me roughly 83 seconds to do it, and that's almost a minute and a half. Then I talked to the clerk, and like it's a long story short, he said it would probably, from the time he date stamped that until Jack walked out, there's probably a 15 or 20 seconds interval there. So you add that on the 83 seconds it took to get up there, and he couldn't have been in the basement more than a minute and a half or so before we came down. And I dare or challenge anybody to choreograph something that close. But I didn't know when I was going to be there, and neither did nobody else. So it almost has to be just like he says. And I've measured that distance from the Western Union. I was run across my notebook here a while back where I had all those measurements in it, and at this times I walked it and all of this. So I did everything to crawl that distance up and down, and I spent a lot of time out there measuring that.
Chief Curry did say, if you get here by 10, you won't miss anything. So
That was his exact words.
Exact words on TV.
Yeah, he said, if you will get here by 10, you won't miss anything.
Excuse me, Mr. Leavelle, when Jack Ruby shot Oswald, when the scuffle started and this all flashed in front of you, do you know or feel, or can you reflect on, do you feel that Ruby was there to fire more than the one shot? In other words, did he stop shooting because he was forced to stop shooting by everyone grabbing at him? Did you?
Well, he was. When I could see him flexing his finger on that trigger, trying to get off of the shot.
Okay.
Graves had grabbed that pistol. And if you know anything about a revolver, if you grab that cylinder and hold it tight enough, it can't fire because that cylinder's got to turn. And I can hold it with 2 fingers, and you can squeeze it all you want to, and you can't, because I've got more leverage than you've got. I can keep that thing from turning. And what I'm saying is it don't take much pressure to keep that cylinder from turning. But he'd also hooked his hand. There was about so much, maybe a quarter of an inch, maybe a little more, of that hammer sticking above the shroud on that, the inner shroud on that 38. But there was about a quarter of an inch or so sticking up there. But I could see his hand, this part of his hand locked over that. And of course the rest of it was around the cylinder. And I could see Ruby's hand flexing on it trying to fire it. But
I asked that only because, so in your own words, you feel that Ruby would have fired more than one shot into Oswald, yes?
undoubtedly.
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 All right, that's interesting, simply because Earl Ruby, his brother, has personally told me that he was just trying to hurt Oswald, that he had no intentions of killing him, but he was just trying to hurt him.
You don't shoot somebody with the intention of hurting them.
Thank you.
There's no way of doing that.
Especially in the gut.
No, not through the guts anyhow. Even though Ruby's attorney.
In fact, he used that as a premise to strengthen his argument. He said if he wanted to kill Oswald, he would have shot him in the head. And I just needed to know from someone who was there. See, Earl Ruby wasn't there. You were.
Well, you don't take it from a police officer. If I run into somebody I'm going to shoot, I don't take time to aim at his head. I aim at the biggest part of the target, which is usually the breast and the chest and the guts. And that's where it's going to stop.
This Mr. Graves wasn't handcuffed. If it took the time to elevate and reach up, probably.
Well, not only that, but you can dodge a little bit there too. But you don't. When you start to shoot somebody, you don't. Unless you're a sniper, you may. But in a situation like that, or if I have a confrontation with somebody, like on an arrest, I shoot for the biggest part of the target I hit, and that's usually right here.
So you feel that Ruby was trying to kill Oswald? I mean,
He was trying to shoot him, and that's the only reason you shoot somebody.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Leavelle, we really appreciate your time and.
Better cut that off, you're still running up there.
That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Leavelle.
Oh, you wanted it.